I am Don Tess, better known as the Dawn of Beer.
And I'm M. Soder, better known as Pints and Panels.
Welcome to episode 54 of the Olive Oak Beer Podcast. Every 2 weeks, we talk with leading experts and take a deep dive into one topic in beer. This week on the show, we're going to talk about vanilla beers. But first, please visit oliveoakbeer.com and follow us on social media at oliveoakbeer. And if you're feeling generous, please visit patreon.com/oliveoakbeer to support this show and others. M, do you like vanilla in beer?
I do when it's a little bit of a light touch. I think it really showcases the roastiness of stouts and pastry stouts. You know, the thing is, though, I don't really know a lot about using vanilla in beers. And I haven't really had that many of them. What about you?
Yeah, no, I'm the same as you. I feel I can taste the difference between extract and real vanilla, but other than that, I don't really know anything. So I am really looking forward to doing a deep dive on vanilla because that's what we do on this show.
That is what we do. I'm excited.
Yes, but first, please, if you would like to help support this show, please reach out to us, podcast@allaboutbeer.com. And speaking of supporting this show, here's a word from our sponsors.
Welcome to Estrella Galicia, where brewing excellence has been a family tradition since 1906. They're all about lager, rooted in German brewing heritage. Maintaining their commitment to tradition, they brew exclusively in their original brewery in La Coruña, Spain. Each beer boasts its own distinctive recipe. No shortcuts, no compromises. They shun high-gravity tricks and avoid additives, even in their alcohol-free beers, and stick firmly to traditional methods. Their passion for beer sets them apart as they embrace and celebrate the art of brewing. At Estrella Galicia, they love beer above all things. Experience the difference and know more about it on Instagram at Estrella Galicia, USA.
Horace Aged Ales was started in April 2015 by Kyle Harrop. It has been a one-man operation since the beginning. It was built around a business model that would allow him to do it on a small scale and work a full-time aerospace career. Horace has had a bottle club named The Convocation for 7 years now that has grown from its original 200 members to 600 members. There's a lottery for a few new members every May, so watch that space. Welcome to the show, Kyle.
Thank you.
So, since 2015, according to your website, you've been making some pretty interesting beers, and apparently people like them because your Untapped rating is a pretty remarkable 4.36.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, so I noticed you make a lot of imperial stouts, pastry stouts, and you use vanilla quite often, which is why we asked you to be on our show today. Why do you like vanilla as an ingredient?
For that particular style, imperial stouts, I think it gives a level of sweetness first and foremost, and kind of hides a bit of that roasty profile. And I think vanilla's evolved quite a bit since 2015. I think when I was getting started and like before that in my homebrew days, it was typically bourbon Madagascar beans or Tahitian beans, and they're completely different. But there wasn't the crazy amount of varieties that are available today. And I would say each year that goes by, I've tried at least 5 or 6 new varieties for like the past half decade and pleasantly surprised each time. So to answer the question, I think I like using it so much because it's still provides that newness and adventure for me with brewing.
You mentioned different types of vanilla.
Yeah.
Yeah, like how do you think vanilla flavors like work with the beer? Are there different varieties that are like, oh, that one in my pastry stout was killer versus do you put vanilla in other beers besides stouts, or is this
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I've done it in a few different sours and barley wines and other strong ales. But yeah, there's definitely varieties I gravitate towards, and there's some I would never use again. I think the one I use most these days is from the Democratic Republic of Congo.
Whoa.
And I love that one because from aroma to flavor, it is very different, but it plays off my stout bases really well. You get a big prune, dark fruit aroma and then the flavor is more sweet and marshmallowy, what you would expect from like a bourbon Madagascar bean, but with a little bit more complexity. So I've really used that. I would say Planifolia Pur came out 3-4 years ago. So I would say I've been using that at least half the time in the last 4 years, that specific variety. And I've used, let's go through some recent ones. A lot of the new Brazilian beans have been very interesting, and some are even the size of like a banana. They're
What?
pretty wild. Yeah,
What?
if you you'd have to scroll through my Instagram back to when I had those, or I'll look for some, but they're uh they're quite large. I think when I bought pound bags from Ted Jones Vanillas of the World, they were maybe 5 beans in the whole bag. And they had a really crazy like tobacco and leather quality to them. And
Oh.
definitely I would use them in, I wouldn't say I wouldn't, but it would take a particular kind of beer or something that was coming out of barrel that had something that would play off that well, because it was very different than what I'm used to using. But again, fun because it keeps me on my toes. And I think like in past memory, like recent memory, the Hawaiian beans have been really fun. A lot of the beans from the islands I feel like they have more sweetness, and they play well with stouts. Trying to think. There's Papua New Guinea beans, there's Samoan beans. If you were to go to Ted Jones' website, I would guess there's 4 or 5 dozen different varieties now. So it's not what it was a couple years ago, even. I mentioned earlier, you had those two beans kind of 9, 10 years ago, typically, and then Ugandan and that stuff kind of came along. And then fast forward like 5 years later, I would say there was a dozen, maybe 2 dozen beans to choose from, but that was also the peak of how expensive vanilla got. I remember it being 500, 600 a pound, where a lot of the varieties now are 100, 200 a pound typically. So that was a change I was happy about because I use quite a bit of vanilla in my beers. I do not shy away from it. So that was a lot of rambling, but hopefully answered the question.
Like you mentioned, some favorite beans that you like using, but you also mentioned that, you like to try some new ones from time to time. So when you get a new bean, and it sounds like they offer, pretty diverse aromas and flavors,
Yeah.
how do you formulate a recipe? Do you taste like do you make a little tea out of the vanilla and then you go, oh, okay, I want to build a, 8% stout with extra roastiness, or I'm just making stuff up. How do you
Yeah.
how do you think about this?
I think for me, typically now, I've really only been making barrel aged beer. I've quite a bit of barrels full of stout and barley wine at this point. So I'm not typically putting vanilla into fresh beers as much anymore. So I would taste the barrels and kind of decide from there. And I kind of have a rule of thumb. So if I have a crazy barrel, like a Pappy Van Winkle barrel or a BTAC barrel or some one off that's really crazy, I'll typically use a bean I'm comfortable with, like a Congo I mentioned earlier. But if I'm using like a run of the mill barrel that I have, 20 or 30 barrels of the same stout base in, that's when I'll branch out and try new ones. But when I do try new ones, I'll pull basically a sample and just use like a bean or half a bean, let it kind of sit in there, direct contact overnight typically, and then kind of see what that did to the stout. And I think application wise, I'm doing a lot of this once I decide on a bean in the bright tank, and recirculating as well, where I know a lot of fellow brewers will put beans directly into the oak barrels, the bourbon barrels. So I think everyone's got a little different way of doing it, but I like the extraction I get from doing it on the backside, and it's easy to taste, every 24 hours or so to see when it gets to where you want it to end up.
Hmm.
Does vanilla need to be fresh? Is
Um,
freshness an issue or?
I have never really held on to them too long. I would say the most maybe 6 months, but they're bagged. Um, I think a lot of them are even vacuum sealed, so I'm sure it does. I wouldn't use older beans if given the choice. I would imagine they would dry out if they weren't in the right temperature, and I try to keep mine like in dark, cool places, whether that's good or bad, but that's how I've always done it. So I'm gonna continue.
Um, does it have to be like you mentioned, when you're testing, you might do half a bean. Like, do you have to use a whole pod or you grind it or dry it or
No, I'll typically cut the bean, slice the bean, and then get the caviar out.
the caviar?
Yeah.
Like that. What exactly is that?
That's what I call the innards of the vanilla bean.
Okay. Does it look like little fish eggs?
It can, depending on the variety, for sure. You'll get like small speckles, but those bigger Brazilian ones, when you cut those open, yeah, they look like fish eggs for sure. Some of them.
Okay.
You touched a little on price.
Yeah.
I'm assuming that, if things are coming from the Congo or, the Pacific Islands, that this shit's expensive.
It used to be
Uh,
a lot more, to
oh,
be honest.
okay.
Yeah, I think there was a shortage like half a decade ago. I'm trying to remember. It was definitely pre-COVID where I was spending 20, $30,000
Oh,
on vanilla for one batch of beer. Um,
What,
oh.
wait, hold on a second. One batch?
yeah, I like thinking back, I've gone as high as like 10 pounds of vanilla per barrel, so um that can get
10,
expensive at $600 a pound.
10 pounds per barrel.
Yeah,
Oh
31
my.
gallon.
I was gonna just ask about your capacity. Oh my, that
Uh,
is,
that's like a mic drop there. Like,
I know. I have not, yeah. Thank you for coming. No, it's,
wow.
wow. I
Does
don't,
it, I mean, is
is,
that normal?
yeah, I was
That
also
can't be
just about to
normal.
ask that,
Um, I don't think so, but I I kind of set the expectation early as far as what my customers expect from a Horse beer flavor wise. And if I do adjunct something, it's known to be pretty over the top, whether it's vanilla, coconut, hazelnut, etc. So, um, I have found that 5 or 6 pounds per barrel these days is kind of my sweet spot, but I have gone extreme and up into the double digits, like I said.
And is that because that particular bean like maybe was less intense or you just or the beer was more intense or like what's
No, that
driving the
at that point, that was probably more experimentation.
okay.
Yeah.
I'm
it's
I'm
like
still kind of
I know. I
flabbergasted
feel like
by
you're just
this.
like making this beer is also vanilla extract. That's what I would say.
Yeah.
Some of them could teeter on that flavor profile.
Like maybe you
Um,
could supply your beer to like ice cream makers and they could make ice cream
Yeah.
out of your beer too.
hey, that has definitely happened. I think they're out of West Covina, Scoops. They've made
Oh,
ice cream out of a couple of my beers.
that's got to be expensive ice cream too then.
Yeah, for sure.
Here's your $70 scoop of ice cream.
I would eat that. So
Um, you kind of mentioned how you use vanilla, but in terms of other brewers, I assume you must be familiar and maybe have
Yeah.
experimented. Like, do you know our other brewers, are they using extracts and are they putting it in the mash or kettle or do they quote unquote
Yeah,
dry hop with it?
it's all across the board. More brewers use extracts than I would want, that's for sure. Um, And I think it kind of takes away from the fun of vanilla itself with so many varieties now. I mean, it's really endless. I could pull every barrel I have and do a vanilla treatment in a different way. And for me, like the way I work is I don't like doing a lot of the same things twice. So I kind of get an idea in my head and go with it. And it's just a lot more fun when you have something like a new bean to mess with or a new combination. I think my club members really have loved my vanilla beers the last few years, and it's kind of opened me up to trying some off the wall things. So I had four barrels that I really liked before this new club year started, and they were all different. But I had an idea of making a combination of four vanilla beans I hadn't used before and the same ratios and everything, and doing the same vanilla treatment on those four different barrels. And those have been some of my favorite beers in recent memory. And it's been fun to hear the feedback on those as well.
Do you know how brewers with their IPAs, they'll put on the can, oh, this is a single hop strata or whatever. Are you trying to educate your drinkers too in terms of would you put that information?
Absolutely.
You do. Okay, awesome.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think if I had a downfall, it'd probably be like over details. Like you get the barrel, you get how long it's been, you get each variety of every adjunct in it. I'm ABV is tested down to the 2 decimal points, so I'm over the top in that case.
I think you and I would be very good friends.
Are there, since you are so detail oriented with your vanilla, are there vanillas you have used that your customers are like, that's the one, man?
Yes, absolutely, and it's Congo.
Hmm.
So I came out with this beer Planifolia Per, and then I did the double barrel age version. Um, and then last year was the triple barrel age version.
Of
And
course.
yeah, everyone that has was in the club for those 3 years has definitely raved about that. And I get comments like, "Why would you use anything else if it tastes that good?" So,
Damn.
um, yeah, I've set the expectation with that one for sure. But this new combination I was just talking about, they've been very well received so far, and I think it opened their minds back up to what vanilla can be, because these new ones have kind of four different things going on, and that could be that it's four different beans, or it could just be the combination of what it did to it. But it's a little earthy. It's very perfumey in that it's got like what you would expect like a vanilla in a bakery to smell like.
Mm,
And then it's got that dark fruit component, and it ends with a little bit of like a roasted chocolate almost.
damn.
Yeah,
Yeah.
That sounds delicious.
it does.
Yeah, I'm a big
Uh,
fan of those ones.
You touched on that you were a home brewer before.
Yeah, definitely.
And do you have any tips for home brewers on how to improve their beers when brewing with vanilla?
Um, yeah, I mean it's really the same application, I think. Honestly, it's I think a lot easier from a home brewing perspective because surface area is a lot smaller, your batches are smaller, and if you have direct contact with the bean, you're going to get a lot of flavor and probably quicker. So, I think my advice would be don't go overboard, because vanilla tends to impart pretty heavily when it's on like a 5 gallon batch, for example.
and use Congo vanilla and
Yeah,
no more than 18 pounds in that 5 gallon
always con.
batch.
Um, yeah, and I don't have Ted's sheet in front of me, but I want to say the first time I bought Congo was It was $550 a pound, and I think it's under 200 now. So it's definitely not the
I mean,
most extravagant bean anymore.
I mean, people would be foolish not to use it at that price.
Yeah, it's great.
You know, in common parlance, vanilla actually almost has like a negative connotation that it means ordinary or plain. What do you want beer lovers to understand and appreciate about vanilla, that it's not ordinary or plain?
I think the best way to discredit that would be release a beer non-adjuncted and release the same beer with vanilla, which I do a lot. My whole Cloudbreaker series has been that, where I'll do the same exact barrel and split it in half, and one will be nothing and one will be vanilla of some sort. And just see what the vanilla can do to the beer. I've noticed on those really high ABV, like double, triple barrels, it really hides the heat well. It provides like a softness and a sweetness that you really can't get otherwise. And maybe coconut would be the other adjunct that would provide enough sweetness to do that. But vanilla is more of a perceived sweetness. It's not a sugary bean by any means, but it gives you that sense of I'm drinking something desserty, pastry like.
Right, right. Awesome. Can you share your social media handles so that everybody can see what you're up to and be envious that they don't get to try them?
It's at Horace H Ales on Instagram, and my website's not hasn't been updated in half a decade or anything, so that's typically it, or emailing me directly. That's unfortunately the only two outlets at this point.
Okay, awesome. Well, thank you for your time, Kyle.
Yeah, thanks so
Thank you.
much.
No, thank you.
Cheers.
Cheers.
And we'll be right back with Ted Jones of Vanillas of the World to tell us everything there is to know about vanilla. If you enjoy the All About Beer podcast, please thank our sponsors.
Estrella Galicia has an international project called Son Estrella Galicia, which embodies their passions, music and beer. It goes beyond just sponsoring concert venues or music festivals. It's about creating unforgettable music and beer experiences that generate a positive impact and adapt to the different cities that host them, such as London, Brighton, and New York. These projects are all about bringing people together and sharing cultural experiences, grounded in Son Estrella Galicia's deep community connection. They focus on working with local vendors, showcasing local artists, and supporting sustainability efforts. Whether in Galicia or cities around the world, the brand's mission is all about staying connected to the local community. If you want to keep up to date with these events, follow the Instagram page at Son Estrella Galicia.
Ted Jones has a long history in restaurants and food services, having started 7 restaurants and other companies involved in commercial kitchens and ingredients. Since 1993, Ted has been working with vanilla and now sources vanilla from over 50 countries at Vanillas of the World, supplying major internet resellers, ice cream manufacturers, breweries, chocolate makers, and spice companies. Welcome to the show, Ted.
Well, thank you so much. Appreciate you even asking me to join you.
Well, I am a nerd, as all of our listeners know, and I'm really looking forward to learning a lot about vanilla because I know very little. And so, why don't we start with that? Why don't you give us Vanilla 101? Like, what exactly is vanilla? How is it grown? Maybe even a little bit of history and society. And like, we think of it as a food additive, but I think they use it in perfume and stuff. So, Vanilla 101.
Okay, I'll try to keep it brief. Most people know that vanilla originated in Central America and it was brought to Europe. And for about almost 200 years, they could not get it to produce a vanilla bean. And the reason was because it has to be hand pollinated. So that was finally figured out. And once that was figured out, then fast forward, vanilla was begun to take hold in many of the French territories, the Bourbon Islands, Madagascar, Reunion, Mauritius, Comoros, in the southern Indian Ocean. It had a perfect climate. Vanilla is a fruit-bearing orchid. There's about 30,000 orchids, and there are, I believe, about 110 vanilla species. And those are the only fruit-bearing orchids that are known at this time. Primarily planifolia, or what's called bourbon vanilla or Madagascar vanilla, is about 2/3 of the world's supply. Madagascar supplies probably about 2/3 of the world's supply. Other commercial areas that it's grown have been Mexico. Obviously, initially it was grown there, and Indonesia and Papua New Guinea and Uganda. Those are the kind of the 5 big growing regions of the world.
Okay.
There's-
Go ahead.
Oh no, I was just gonna say the only one I've ever heard of is Madagascar. Why do you think, my knowledge of vanilla is not great as yours, obviously. Why do you think that is? Why don't we hear about other vanillas versus, is it just because it's so popular? Is that what vanilla extract is made out of? My knowledge of vanilla is not great.
My understanding is that most vanilla extracts that you buy at the grocery store isn't even vanilla.
Well, quite a bit, yeah, isn't it? Has to, the FDA regulates vanilla. So it's either pure vanilla extract, which is a FDA that has a standard for that. And otherwise, if it's not pure vanilla extract, it could be imitation vanilla extract, natural vanilla. You see a lot of natural vanilla now. That's natural vanillin. That's derived from pulp manufacturing, and it's a byproduct of pulp manufacturing, paper manufacturing.
Oh,
But I think the main reason it probably started in Madagascar was the French were pretty involved in that area. And Madagascar is a very large landmass for an island, as opposed to, say, Mauritius or Reunion, where the original vanilla was grown. So there was a lot more area to grow in Madagascar. And then the Madagascar government, when they gained their independence, they really, and to this day, have pushed and marketed and done all they can to build the vanilla business and make sure they're the dominant player in the world. But just because vanilla's from Madagascar doesn't mean it's the best. It's like saying, wine from the Napa Valley. It can be some of the worst, it can be average, or it can be, exemplary. So it's really a function of the grower and the curer and how they handle the vanilla that determines ultimately the quality.
okay. So there's the geographic source. And then you also mentioned like there's a number of different orchids that produce vanilla. I think of most, the average consumer thinks of vanilla as one flavor, being vanilla. So what do these different types of vanilla, how do they vary? What are different flavors that people should be, and aromas that people should be looking for in these different varieties or species? Are they different species?
There are some different species. There's
Okay.
primarily 2 species that make up probably 99.9% of the commercial market. And those are planifolia, which is probably 95+%, and then Tahitensis, or the Tahitian style vanilla. That's the remaining. Now there's Pompona, there's Cribbiana, there's Citatra, there's a number of, there's Bahiana, there's Chamasonis it's almost as big as a dried banana. They're huge. Kyle's worked with some of those. But primarily vanilla is grown in the tropics between 20 degrees north to 20 degrees south of the equator. So all the countries in basically Central Africa, through Indonesia, into Papua New Guinea, Northern Australia, Vanuatu, Fiji, Tonga, Tahiti, and then over to Hawaii, and then into South and Central America. That's where the vanilla is grown. And um, it's grown on very, very small plots. Could be a few vines with one, person's property, to very large plantations. There's a plantation we're working with in the Philippines that's 500 hectares. So that's about 1,300 acres.
Oh, wow.
It's massive.
Kyle mentioned his favorite vanilla that you have given or sold him rather, was from the Congo. Do you have a favorite vanilla in all the ones that you work with? And why is that your favorite?
Well, I would say I don't have any one specific favorite. I've got maybe three or four. The Citatra out of Costa Rica is extremely unique, very unique flavor. The Caribbeana, very short, plump beans out of Guatemala and Mexico are very unique, very fragrant. A lot of brewers love those. Probably I would say, if I had to just pick one, it would be Cook Islands Tahitensis. It's almost and a close second would be Marquesas Islands Tahitensis. I love the Tahitensis because it's a fruitier. It's not the date plum raisin. It's the cherry almond floral, and cotton candy. Really heavy cotton candy on those two in particular. It's just really amazing. And kind of one of the things, when we started this, you would only see those five big growing regions, those vanillas sold in the US. And I just kind of went on a mission that I wanted to support small grower curers in very obscure, overlooked areas of the world. All the big extractors, the people that manufacture pure vanilla extract, primarily, not always, but primarily, shop price. They just want price. They want the cheapest beans they can get and as many as they can. So countries like the Cook Islands, like Marquesas Islands, like Tonga, Vanuatu, Fiji, Ghana, and West Africa. I mean, they're smaller growers. They would never have any opportunity to sell vanilla in the United States. And I wanted to really make a market for these people because I had traveled, I've been to a number of plantations, and I've seen it is the most labor intensive crop. I think saffron is the only other crop that's more labor intensive, but vanilla is just such an interesting crop. And I just love meeting the growers who are so passionate about it. And I really wanted to embark on finding as many interesting areas of the world. So once we started bringing in all these different varieties, a lot of, in this case, brewers who had wanted maybe Uganda or Madagascar, now they had so many options, we decided we needed to put together a sensory panel. So I got some of my really good customers, people with, I would say, perfumers' noses, and we started putting together a sensory analysis on every bean. And now what's interesting, the shift has been from origin, and it still is origin to some extent, but now it's primarily driven by sensory. We have brewers that listen. We want to have we want to highlight a chocolate or coconut note, or we want to have a caramel note. What do you suggest? And I'll say, you have a couple options there: Comoros or Australia. And so the brewers now are becoming way more sophisticated, and they're seeing that they can enhance their flavors and modify the flavors of the beer with different vanillas. It's just not vanilla. It's so much more.
That sounds awesome. You mentioned growers and curers. Can you get into a little bit how vanilla is cured and processed and handled, and how does what impact does that have on brewers? Like, should brewers understand this process and think about making sure they get whole beans or that they're fresh or extracts are terrible or I don't want to put words in your mouth, but
Yeah,
can you get
no,
into
no,
that a little bit?
it's a good question. I think if brewers fully understood the amount of labor and time and energy and passion that goes into growing and curing vanilla, they would be blown away. And they would realize what a bargain it is. Because if it was grown and cured and processed in America, the prices would be 5 to maybe 20 times higher because of our labor costs. So basically, when vanilla is first started and planted, it's not planted in the ground. It has a host. It could be a post, but generally it's maybe Glurcidia, which is a shade tree. It could be citrus. It could be cacao. And it will latch onto the side and start vining. And what you're doing is looping it. You don't want it to go over 6 feet because you want to manage it. You loop it back down, you loop it back up. Before it ever produces, Don, you're looking at anywhere from 3 to 5 years before you ever get any kind of yield. And generally 4 to 5 is when you're starting into commercial production. So you've had to do an awful lot of work, clear the land, get your shade trees or structures in, and then you've got to be looping it and tending it and nipping the buds and doing all this work, and you're not making any money, you're not getting any return. And then finally, you will have to, this is what's amazing. It flowers one day a year for about 4 to 6 hours. And you have to pollinate it by hand during that time. And a good pollinator will pollinate 1,000 to 1,500 flowers in a 4 to 6 hour period that one day. Now, they don't all open on the same day, of course, but there's generally, it'll be maybe over a month, month and a half. So you'll be out there in the plantation or wherever, hand pollinating. It then takes 8 to 10 months for that bean to develop. And it looks kind of like just a long green bean. It has zero flavor. And this is what blows my mind, how anybody ever figured this out. The flavor is never developed until the photosynthesis is stopped through a killing action of putting it in hot water at about 60 to 65 degrees centigrade for 2.5 to 3.5 minutes, depending on the size of the vanilla and the size of the batch you're putting in the water. That kills the photosynthesis, starts an enzymatic reaction, and then you begin this fermentation drying process that generally goes on for weeks to months, then goes into conditioning. And all this time you're monitoring it and constantly checking the moisture level, constantly touching the beans, making sure they're supple. And in the first part of that stage of curing, generally the beans are put out in the hot tropic sun. Well, the tropics can have sudden rain showers. So you have to be prepared with plastic to immediately cover them. My son spent 4 months in the South Pacific last year working with 5 of our growers in New Caledonia, which is probably the best grower in the world, and then up to Northern Australia, and then to a couple of growers in Fiji, and then finally a grower in Tonga. And he could not believe how much was involved in managing everything. And he did everything from pollinating to clearing areas, fertilizing, harvesting, and doing some curing. So it's just very, very involved. And again, if brewers understood this or saw this, they would just be amazed.
I will tell you, you blew my mind. So
I
yes.
am also, I'm also that's insane.
And how, like you say, how did anybody figure this out?
I don't know, because it took 200 years for the Europeans to figure out how to hand pollinate it. Now, the reason it was getting pollinated in the Aztecs in that area of Central America is because there was a very small bee there. And there is some pollination, throughout the world, but it's generally done by insects, hummingbirds, butterflies. But you can't operate a commercial operation like that with, with it flowering only 4 to 6 hours a day, one day a year. You'd have to have a million butterflies, or hummingbirds. So that's why the hand pollinating came in. But that in itself is amazing right there. Then
Yeah.
add in the curing process, which takes this green bean with zero flavor and through an enzymatic fermentation drying process, you come up with these incredible flavors. And it's amazing. Now, we've worked with Boise State Chemistry Department and the University of Florida Chemistry Department because we wanted to do chemical analysis. And I wanted to see, is there anything chemically that correlates with sensory? And I was blown away. We have some vanilla from the Congo, Democratic Republic of the Congo, beautiful vanilla, and some incredible vanilla from the Comoros. They're almost identical chemistry wise, but the sensory couldn't be further from one another. I mean, they're completely different sensory wise. It's mind blowing.
Yeah.
So I would have to just say there's probably more we don't know about vanilla than we do know about vanilla.
Yeah. I love this.
So when all's said and done, and the pods or whatever the beans go out, does freshness matter when it comes to vanilla? So if I get it, do I need to use it immediately, or does it shelf stable? What's the
It's very shelf
yeah.
stable. The key to success with vanilla is that it must be harvested when it's ripe. You cannot take all the beans off one vine at once because, it's like fruit. I'm sure you guys have a fruit tree. Nothing ever ripens at the same time. It could be over a few weeks or a month. So the same with vanilla. So the problem with vanilla, though, is it's grown in third world countries. It's a cash crop, and you can't really blame the farmers for, in many cases, picking too early. The vanilla will reach full size and plumpness within about 4 to 5 months. So you could pick early, but the problem is it hasn't fully developed. The glucovanillin, the sugars have not fully developed. So anytime you see mold in vanilla, 99% of the time, that's going to be the result of someone picking the vanilla too soon. And it didn't have the glucovanillin sugars that it needed to have because that preserves it. So a vanilla that's picked when it's fully ripened, almost ready to split, starting to get a little bit yellow, the green bean is getting a little yellow. If that's picked at that point, and then you have a cure that knows what they're doing, that vanilla should be shelf stable up to 5 to 10 years if
Oh,
it's
wow.
held properly. Now, we've received vanilla, and I won't name the country, but smaller grower, and the guy shipped us vanilla, and we got some in and a little bit of mold. And I said, hey, we got some issues here. And he said, well, how could you have mold? I said, well, the only reason is you have some beans that you picked too soon. He goes, well, wait a minute, my cure came from Madagascar, curing. He was one of the best curers in Madagascar for 30 years. I said, it doesn't matter how good the cure is if you don't have fully ripened vanilla. So there's 2 steps to this. You got to have fully ripened vanilla, and then you have to cure it properly. So anyway, it's a process and it's a learning curve. And I would say we spend quite a bit of our time educating vanilla growers all over the world. One of my friends wrote a book, co-authored a book called the Vanilla Handbook. And it's the key book, training book in the world for growing vanilla, starting a plantation or just starting, around your house or whatever, from start to finish, and it goes through curing. And it's mainly a photograph book of what to do and what not to do. And we send that all over the world. And try to support farmers with the tools, and then we put people in touch with other vanilla experts. And it's really become a neat community, kind of like the brewing community, working together or doing collaborations. We're doing that, but we're doing it in foreign countries, and it's pretty cool.
Yeah, that is very cool. I almost hesitate to ask this last question because I don't want to hurt your feelings. Um, I think that in popular culture, the term vanilla is often used as a synonym for plain or boring. You know, vanilla ice cream is the most boring flavor of ice cream. So, you've touched on all the complexities here. What is one thing you really wish people understood and appreciated about vanilla?
Oh, I think if they had an opportunity to see and taste or smell the different vanillas, they would have a completely different opinion because vanilla is the most complex flavor. It's also probably the greatest flavor enhancer. So when it comes to brewing, it's not just for stouts. It's in all, you can put it in, and we have brewers that are putting in every type of beer because it's many times not about vanilla. It's about enhancing all the other flavors that you want to bring out. And there's no better product anywhere than vanilla for doing that. And that's what's been used in the ice cream industry. To have the best chocolate ice cream, you have to have pure vanilla in it.
Ah,
Same with caramel. And so this is no different in brewing. You want to, it's interesting, some of the very top ranked beers, um, almost all of them, of the top 25, there was I think about a dozen that were stouts or porters or used some sort of vanilla, and our vanilla was in all of them.
Nice.
And but it wasn't always the same vanillas, it was all different vanillas. But this is where brewers can get really creative, and using the sensory analysis, they can really do some interesting things.
awesome. I love that. If people want to learn more about vanilla and see your world travels to all these wonderful vanilla places in the world, can you please share for us your social media handles or your website?
Yes, I'm not. I'm not a expert in social media. One of my sons does that, and a daughter. But we're on Instagram, Vanillas of the World, and I don't know what follows that. And our website, it's a retail website, but it gives you kind of an idea. It has about 75% of what we have. Our website is vanillas, plural, vanillasoftheworld.com. And I just encourage any brewer to reach out to me directly via email, and they can do that through the website, or my email is very simple, ted@ted-jones.com. And I'd be happy to speak with them on the phone or via email and provide wholesale pricing. Our website is really uh, uh, more of a retail site. It's not really for brewers. We deal direct with brewers,
I
so
see.
that's the best way to get a hold of me.
But perhaps homebrewers might be interested in that retail site?
Oh yes, yeah, we have a
Yeah,
number of people
perfect.
that are home brewers that purchase through the website, and it's not to say it's way more expensive. It's just a little bit more expensive,
Right.
but that's a good way to get started.
Awesome. Thank you, Ted. Really appreciate your time, and more importantly, I really appreciate your expertise because you blew my mind.
Oh, thanks, Don, and I appreciate you guys even reaching out to me, and thank you so much. It means a lot to us.
Cheers. Thank you.
Okay.
So, tell me what you learned about vanilla.
Oh
Like,
my God, everything.
yeah, how much of that
Like
did you already know?
I
Like
no,
none?
none. Like this was such a great this is why this is an episode that we've made that was like I went in not knowing anything and I
Yeah.
left being like, "Oh my God, I learned so much." Like the fact that there's a vanilla pod the size of a banana. What the hell?
Yeah, I'm a little bit of a nerd, as you know, and like I definitely I'm gonna buy some books about vanilla, and now I'm obsessed about this. I want to learn all about vanilla. And appreciate it in beer now. Like I'm going like the same way I look for, Amarillo hops on a can of IPA. I want to see on Imperial Stouts. This had,
That that like Congo,
Congo.
yeah,
Yeah,
that Congo,
exactly.
Uganda, the Cook Islands.
Yeah.
Oh, this was me. It was
I
amazing.
I loved this episode, in case you can't tell. Oh, everybody, please, if you enjoyed this episode, and you know what, even if you didn't, please visit allaboutbeer.com and follow us on social media at allaboutbeer. And if you're feeling generous, please visit patreon.com/allaboutbeer to support this show and others. If you have questions for the experts, please email us podcast@allaboutbeer.com. That's also the email for feedback, suggestions, or to inquire about supporting this show through advertising. Em, how can people reach out to you?
I am at Pints and Panels across all social media, and my website is www.pintsandpanels.com. What about you, Don?
I am at the Dawn of Beer on X, Threads, and Instagram, and people can drop me an email at drop me an email at dawn@thedawnofbeer.com. If you enjoy this show, please share it with your friends, post about us on social media, and like and subscribe to the show. Please help us spread the word of good beer. And here's a final word from our sponsor.
Son Estrella Galicia has a unique project called What Does Your Beer Sound Like? This initiative draws a connection between the creative process of making music and brewing beer. To them, music and beer share the same essence. One requires instruments, the other raw ingredients, but both are crafted through artisanal creative methods, leaving you with unforgettable experiences. In this project, raw materials used in brewing are likened to the instruments needed to create a song. It's a fascinating concept, right? You can explore more about it on their YouTube channel at Son Estrella Galicia.
This show is produced by All About Beer. Visit allaboutbeer.com for articles, notes on this show and others, and to connect via the newsletter and social media. Cheers!
Cheers, everyone.